Thank you very much also from my side to Christina and to Mirella and to Gideon. I thought it was really nice to hear your examples, different kinds of impact on people, on the communities, on the mutual learning process. Really, really nice. I always feel to some extent this kind of information gives a much better picture of what what these programs are there for than all the rules and all the frames and yeah, all the sentences on paper that you can read about them in a document like the program guide. So I'm grateful we had that, especially for those of you who maybe have not experienced the programs yet, but also for those of you who have already done so, to see really that projects can be very ambitious. I found especially the European, the youth exchange project really ambitious. And maybe in the sense also a little bit scary. Not every exchange has to have that great an impact. But it's good. It's really wonderful to see it. And even though it's an older project, it's very much up to date, because it's an ecological project. So something that very much fits, and a very participatory project. So something that very much fits also into the new program generation, I think. So the new Erasmus Plus program has just been launched, as I said, and I will now share my screen and take you a little bit through it. Let me take a moment. Here it is. There we go. I think you see it all. Enriching lives, opening minds. Isn't that a wonderful slogan that the Commission has thought about for the new programs? So the Erasmus Plus program is the EU program for education, training, youth and sport, for the period 21-27. Here, of course, we will only talk about the youth part, but it's worth keeping in mind that it's a much larger program which has a lot of other components. Education, maybe certainly the most known for you, the students exchange program. The program supports various kinds of political policies, most notably in the field of youth, the EU strategy for youth, but there are also other policy plans like the digital education plan, for instance, which also has quite an importance also in the field of youth, and others that are more relevant for other areas of the program. The strategy, again, some of you might have looked at it. You can always easily look it up on the web if you have not done so yet. EU Youth Strategy 2019 to 2027 specifies the areas that are priorities for youth, or should be priorities for youth in the coming years, and work around three keywords: connect, empower and engage. And you will see that in the program also the different program actions link to these three different elements. So to connecting young people, to empowering young people, and to engaging in society. There are also 11 youth goals that have been developed, that are also written down in the strategy, and it's also worth looking at them. And to see a bit what is up there, because also there you can make a lot of connections between what are policy priorities and what could be priorities of projects that you're trying to address. And making these links is always a good thing in any project application, if you're applying for funding. The general aims of the Erasmus Plus program, of the new one, are to support the educational, professional and personal development of people, and thereby contribute to sustainable growth, quality jobs, social cohesion, support for innovation, and strengthening European identity and active citizenship. This is cross-cutting for the whole program. And in the field of youth specifically, the aims are to promote non-formal and informal learning mobility, and active participation of young people, as well as cooperation, quality, inclusion, creativity, and innovation at the level of organizations and policies. So it's about people and it's about organizations. Yeah. The priorities of the program: inclusion and diversity, digital transformation, environment and the fight against climate change, and participation in democratic life. All of these different priorities link to policy strategies. Like I said before, there's also a particular inclusion and diversity strategy that has been developed for the program. In the field of digital transformation, there's this digital action, education action plan, which I've just mentioned already, which also relates to the field of youth. There is a European Green Deal communication, which has just been agreed on in the field of environment and fight against climate change. And there's also a participation strategy in the field of youth, which is important for the program. In particular about inclusion and diversity and participation, we will talk more deeply in the other two sessions to come. So in case you're interested in these two areas, don't miss participating in these two workshops, because there we have more space to really look at what is meant by inclusion and diversity, what is meant by youth participation and engagement, what are the strategies and the aims behind it, and how can it be put into practice, and also what resources are available on a very practical level that you can use in your work. Who can participate in the program? So we're talking about individuals, of course, people in particular. It's a program that is directed to people, but these people in terms of the programs are mainly reached through organizations or institutions or bodies or groups organizing activities for young people or with young people. Therefore, the vocabulary, the terminology in the guide speaks about participants and participating organizations. And mostly we're speaking about participating organizations as the partners in projects. And the participating organizations then make participants available to take part in the different activities. In particular, the target group are young people between 13 and 30 years of age, as well as those working with these young people, namely youth workers and staff and members of organizations active in the field of youth. So youth workers is maybe a term which is which comprises, I think, in the terminology of the program, everybody who works with young people, essentially. That can also be people working as volunteers in organizations, that can be people, youth leaders in some ways, anybody who's actively working in the field of youth. It's maybe important to say that also in societies where professional youth workers do not necessarily exist so much as job categories, or as professions in that sense, they can be named differently, but it's essentially practitioners working with young people in a professional setting in some. The program targets mainly participants based in program countries. A lot of the program guide is referring to actions that are open to program countries only. But then there are also some actions that are open to participants and participating organizations from partner countries. And we will concentrate on those actions in what we're talking about today. Organizations that can submit applications must be based in a program country. Yes, for the moment, this is clearly the case, and it's only like this. There are no exceptions to this at the moment as the program stands for now. What are the program countries? The program countries are all the EU member states, as well as some other countries, the Republic of North Macedonia, Serbia, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Turkey. And then we have Erasmus Plus partner countries. In the former program, there was a lot of talk about neighboring partner countries. I think this terminology has largely disappeared from the new guide. I'm not sure if it's still in some places written, but then it's kind of a leftover. Generally speaking, the guide talks about partner countries. there are different regions that have kind of a bit of a priority status in some way, because some actions are open to, nevertheless, what used to be the neighboring partner countries, namely the Western Balkan region, Eastern Partnership countries, Russia, and the South Mediterranean countries. The Western Balkan partner countries in Erasmus Plus are currently Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Montenegro. Serbia is a member country, of Erasmus Plus, but still currently a partner country in the European Solidarity Corps, as we will see later. And then there, of course, there are also other regions in the world which are can also participate in some projects, most notably under what we'll talk about later on under Key Action 2 projects, and also some other specific calls. What is specific about the Western Balkan region, and you know that better than me, I am sure, many of you, is that there is an accession process of the region. All the countries of the Western Balkans are in a process of accession to the European Union. The process has come a little bit to a halt over the past years. We also know that, and is raising also frustrations at different levels of how it's going. Nevertheless, in terms of the programs, every country has the chance to join the program. It's worth saying that this is not just a decision of the Commission. Of course, at the end of the day, it's a decision of the Commission, but it is most notably also a decision of the country to actually apply for participation and to make the resources for that available. Therefore, North Macedonia has become a member already with the beginning of the last program, and Serbia has joined, but only Erasmus Plus so far, and that was in the interest of Serbia at the moment to join only Erasmus Plus and not the Solidarity Corps. But there are negotiations going on. Apparently, interest has now been also announced by Serbia to potentially join the Solidarity Corps, so we will see what will happen. It's always a question also of then the budget that needs to be made available at the expense of something else, quite likely. So that's an important question. But in principle, the countries have the chance to join, the opportunity to join the program if there is interest. And then, of course, many things change. The cooperation with partner countries in the program, so in mobility, cooperation, and policy dialogue activities in the Erasmus Plus program aims to, and this is taken from the program guide again, so aim to support European organizations in facing global challenges, to strengthen the role of the EU as a global actor, and to build societies that are more resilient and based on mutual trust and intercultural understanding. I think what that expresses is that, of course, the fact that the programs are open to partner countries represents an interest of the European Union to be a global actor, and to, it's very much the perspective of how the cooperation benefits the European organizations. Yeah. So it's a perspective that focuses on the interest of Europe, not so much on the interest of the partner countries to take place in the programs. Yeah. A quick word on who implements the program. Who are the main structures that or institutions that you need to know about when you participate? There's the European Commission, of course, that is responsible for the overall running of the program. Then there is what is called the European Education and Culture Executive Agency, brief executive agency, that is linked to the Commission. It's a part of the European Commission, but it manages some calls, some centralized calls. And then there are national agencies for the program that are based in every program country. And as a general rule, applications for projects are submitted to the national agencies by an organization in that country. So if you have a partner in a project that comes from Slovenia, for instance, that partner can submit the application to their national agency. And if you have several program countries as partners, they can decide, they need to see a little bit where's the best place to submit the project, who is taking the lead and coordinates the project on behalf of every partner in the group. There are some other support structures. There are 7 SALTO resource centers. SALTO Southeast Europe is one of them. There are 6 others. We have colleagues working on thematic areas that support the implementation of certain horizontal priority themes, most notably inclusion and youth participation. Also solidarity and volunteering. We will have colleagues with us from all of these 3 SALTO centers in the next sessions. And there are also 2 other regional SALTO centers working with the other neighboring regions, Euromed and Eastern Europe. And there's a SALTO center working on training and cooperation, and they really do a lot of work to provide support in building capacities of youth workers and developing systems and strategies of how to develop competence building and also recognition of youth work across Europe. Then there are national Erasmus Plus offices that you might have already come across in the different neighboring partner countries. We also have contact points for Erasmus Plus youth and the European Solidarity Corps in the different partner countries of the Western Balkans. In most cases, I think they work together to some extent as far as it's possible. The national Erasmus Plus offices mainly deal with supporting education and training, whereas our contact points that have been nominated by SALTO specifically support the youth field. And so if you have questions and need support, you can always turn to us, but also to your contact point in your country. And for instance, Mirella, who you've just heard, is one of them in Montenegro, and her organization ADPZ. Again, you will meet others in the following sessions. And then there are a lot of web-based places where you can get information. I will direct you here already to the program guide because they're all listed in there. And the European Youth Portal in particular, Andre will also speak about a bit later. Now, this is the program guide. And before I go more into the details of the program and will take you a bit through the different actions, I would just like to say that you will not get around reading the guide. No way. If you want to get involved in the program, if you want to do any project, you will need to read the guide. It's a huge document of several hundred pages, but it's quite logically structured now. It's becoming better, I think, over the generations in a way. It has a general part A at the beginning where you find all the general information about the program, the important features, aims, priorities, and so on. It has a part B, which takes you one by one through the different types of projects that can be organized. Under Key Action 1, learning mobility of individuals, and then under Key Action 2, which is the cooperation among organizations and institutions. And then at the end, it has some information for applicants. That is, if you come from a partner country, if you're based in the partner country, maybe only indirectly relevant for you, as much as you get involved through your partner organization. Part D is a glossary of terms, and I would highlight that part actually, because European administrative language and terminology is sometimes not immediately clear. Words have a specific meaning sometimes, even if they don't seem like it at first place. And it's really helpful to look up sometimes what the terms mean. So it's, even though it comes at the end and is maybe often overlooked, it's a very useful section to take a look at. One more word about the program guide. I would, my advice would always be to take a look at it in a very targeted way. So to go to the chapter directly that you want to read about, not to browse through it from beginning to end, because that's impossible. It's too big and it's too much. And personally, I get confused if I do that. So if you want to find out about youth exchanges, go directly to the page 124 and start reading there. Okay, I said already there are 3 different key actions, and key action 3 is actually something we can neglect for the moment. There is not much in it, only one centralized action, which is not open for partner countries at the moment. What was there before? So for those of you who maybe remember key action 3 from the old program, which was dialogue with policymakers, has been pretty much integrated into key action 1, youth participation activities, and can be found there. You might have heard something about Discover EU. It was a program that was much in the news in the past months, traveling across Europe. That will come. It's not there yet. And it's also only for program countries anyway, but I wanted to mention it will come, but it's not in the program guide at the moment, nowhere. We don't know much about it. So we have key action 1, mobility of individuals, and we have key action 2, cooperation among organizations and institutions. I don't know why this very interesting page does not show anything. This is very interesting that the page is blank. Okay, this is very interesting. I will, here we go. Here we go. I had to click a couple of times. Magic, yes. Magic, magic. Project application deadlines are in autumn and spring. The first one is very soon, in mid-May. And the next one is coming in autumn, October, November. The dates are a little bit different for key action 1 and key action 2, which doesn't make it easy to remember. But I think from what I understood, this is also because it's the first year and things are anyway still a bit difficult to get off the ground. They might be aligned later on in the process next year. Yeah, but for this year, they are like this. So if you have something in the pipeline already, or if you have partners to work with, 11th of May is the first deadline that is coming for projects starting between 1st of August and 31st of December. And then the autumn deadline is for projects that start next year. For key action 2, there's a longer period of time in between the deadline and the starting time of the project, because these projects are also much more complex. So they need more time both in assessment and in implementation. And then there is a deadline for capacity building in the field of youth, which is on the 1st of July, once a year. So this is what it looks like at the moment. We are, maybe I say this very briefly, because we're in these strange COVID times. The new project applications, like the ones that came in the past deadlines, are for regular projects. Yeah, so it's a question of just thinking that you want to do a residential project. You're applying normally for a project that you're hoping to be able to realize. And then if things don't work, as it's happened in the past, you can adapt afterwards to a virtual environment if that is adequate for your project, or you can postpone, quite likely, as it was the case for now. It doesn't take away the difficulty, of course, then handling the things that are maybe already in waiting, and handling new projects that are coming on top. But that is, of course, for the organizations to see, and also to check with the national agencies how that gets handled. In general, there is there is a flexibility, a certain flexibility then to adapt projects to a virtual environment, if that can be done, and if the pandemic continues, and if that's wished by the organization. We can take questions on that later, if there are questions around this. So I will now go into key action 1. There are 3 different actions, and 2 of them you know from the past program, if you have been active then already: youth exchanges, mobility of youth workers, and a new project type is youth participation activities. What is also new is that there is an accreditation now possible for key action 1. The accreditation concerns applicants in the first place. It means basically that an organization that has anyway, that is experienced in the program, or that organizes projects with a certain reliability, is able well to foresee in a longer period that on a regular basis they will be able to do certain activities for a certain amount of young people. They can apply for a kind of framework contract, something like this, which will enable them to get insured that over a longer period of time. In the first place, it's for a 1-year period. Afterwards, the period will be prolonged. They have money to organize a certain amount of projects. So youth exchanges, mobility of youth worker projects, youth participation activities, in this case, in Key Action 1. This means also, of course, for you do not have to say at the beginning who are the partners in this project. This can be open. Nevertheless, if you're a partner organization who has maybe a partner organization that wants to go for such an accreditation contract, there might be a certain reliability, that at certain stages the projects are coming back. On the other hand, of course, it's also a pressure that you have to perform, because then the national agency reserves a certain amount of money, and of course that money needs to be spent. And future contracts will be evaluated on the basis of past performance. So in case you don't manage to do what you said, and in case you have organizations that jump off, or participants that jump off, or activities that you were counting on don't take place, can't take place, and were needed to implement the project, or whatever it is, then it's a problem. And then in the future, you will have a problem getting, you cannot apply for the same amount again. It will have consequences. So what we're seeing at the moment is that there's a certain carefulness on the side both of the national agencies and on the side of the organizations to see if they want to go for something like this or not. It's, I think, quite open. It's also not needed. You can go for individual projects as before. It's just an additional possibility, and we will have to see how it develops, quite simply, now also in the new program, how much this will take priority, this accreditation process, and to what extent not. Key Action 1 youth exchanges. We have just heard a very nice example from Mirella. So we have, it's bringing together young people to foster intercultural dialogue and learning, to strengthen European values and break down prejudices and stereotypes, to develop young people's skills and attitudes, and to raise awareness about socially relevant topics and stimulate engagement in society and active participation. I think we have seen all of this in the project that was presented just now. This is what youth exchanges are all about, and they link to the European Youth Strategy priority of connecting young people. Yeah. I don't have to say much about that. In case needed, you can also do a preparatory visit. So if you're working with partners that you don't know yet, you can also bring together a limited number of people from the different groups concerned and their leaders, and meet in person and prepare the youth exchange. You have to have at least 2 different countries involved. You can implement any kind of non-formal learning program on a topic of your interest that is relevant for your organization and for your partner organizations. It should be a planned learning process, and ideally the young people that in the groups that you want to bring together should be involved in the process, in the preparation, as well as in the implementation, and also the follow-up of the meeting, the actual meeting during the exchange. An activity can last for up to 3 weeks, and you can have 16 to 60 participants in your exchange, plus group leaders of the group, a facilitator. I think that is new. So a person, well, it is not explained what is a facilitator actually in the new program, even though it comes back at different moments. But we're thinking it's somebody who could help and guide the educational program and the implementation, the non-formal learning program during the event. And if you have, especially if you are having young people with fewer opportunities involved that need specific support, you can also have accompanying persons. A project can last up to 2 years. And that means also a project can include several activities, so several youth exchanges. Funding rules, they come also again like this. Funding rules, I will not go over all the funding rules. I will just do this now once for the youth exchange, and it takes a moment, but then afterwards you will see the principle. The principle is the same, basically. I mean, for the different projects. The program works with unit costs mainly. So you get so and so much money per participant in an activity. You get on top of it individual support. Individual support is based also on the person times the number of days and times the number of participants. And it depends. So the individual support is supposed to cover your accommodation, so board and lodging costs normally. So that is depending on the country where the activity takes place. Whereas the organizational support, the unit cost is generally there so that you can develop a program and you can work with people and take them to places and so on and so forth. So this is an additional amount, which is always €100 per person. The individual support at the moment is, well, at the moment in the new program is, I know it's for partner countries at the moment, €29 a day. And that's pretty much similar. It's in Serbia, it's the same amount, and in North Macedonia, it's 28. So it's very similar to that. Slovenia, it's 34. In Croatia, it's 35. Countries can say what they want to put up. Germany is 41. So in the Northern European countries, it's more. So this is how it works. Then on top of these kinds of standardized unit costs, you can get travel costs, of course, reimbursed according to a distance calculator. I will show that in a minute. So according to the kilometers you travel, you get a certain amount of money. Then exceptional costs can be reimbursed according to real costs in case visa are needed, vaccinations, health insurance. You have to argue that you need them, and then they can be reimbursed. Then there is particular inclusion support. So support made available if you work with participants with fewer opportunities, because the program really focuses on giving access to young people that normally would not have the chance so much to be involved in other types of international programs in the field of vocational training or in the field of education. So their specific support is made available per participant, but also on top in case you have other exceptional costs that you need to support young people with few opportunities or special needs. And then there is a certain amount of money that is made available for a preparatory visit, which is 1 participant per participating sending organization, and that person receives €575. That's it, including travel. So that is very much a lump sum you get for that, and full stop. The use of these unit costs and lump sums is meant so that it's in a way easier afterwards also to calculate, so that also the national agency afterwards working on the budget doesn't have to go through all of these things. And maybe also for you, for organizations, it's easier to just put these amounts together rather than calculate real costs and then, you know, in advance, which can change and so on. This is the calculator for travel costs. You will, as you can see, you have so and so much money that you will get for such and such a distance. So you just have to see roughly where people come from, and then you enter this per person in the budget. This is the amount they will get. In some cases, that's a lot, probably more than people will spend. In some cases, that's maybe just. What is new now is that there is what is called green travel. And that means if you're traveling not by plane, but if you're traveling by train in particular, that is very good. But also this green travel is not, from what I understood, really defined what it is. It can be flexibly interpreted, what is green travel. So it depends a bit also on the national agency, how they understand this. And it can potentially also be, I don't know, putting all people on a bus, for instance, that you might argue that that's also green travel. Yeah. In case of green travel, you get a bit more money. Yeah, and you can even get more support for even more days of yeah, the individual support for participants. So it's really, we said the priority of the program is green youth work, and this is what they're trying to promote through that as well. So an example is quite simple here when it comes to funding. If you have, for instance, 3 groups of 10 participants each coming from 3 different countries, an exchange that will take 8 days, you have 1 facilitator with you, you have 3 group leaders, 1 for each group, and the exchange takes place in a neighboring partner country. Let's say it takes place in Albania. Then you will get organizational support of 100 euros for your 30 participants. And you will receive individual support of 29 euros for 34 participants. In this case, the leaders and the facilitator count in as well, because they also need to sleep and they also need to eat, of course, times 10 days. So the days of the exchange plus the travel days. And then this is what you're getting. In case it's green travel, you get a bit more because you can count extra days potentially. Travel costs come on top, exceptional costs come on top, and support for participants with fewer opportunities as well. So that were the youth exchanges. Okay, and this is how the budget works throughout the program. All right. Mobility of youth workers is to support the capacity building of the youth workers. So it's about empowering. It's about empowering young people, and empowering young people because we also need to, and through empowering basically the youth workers in the first place, so those people working with the young people, giving them the chance to develop their capacities, their competences and capacities further, and their skills. It's about developing quality youth work and developing quality practice at the individual level and at the level of the organizations. It's also about community building of youth workers, networking among youth workers. And it's about, at the end of the day, yes, in building the competences and the capacities of the youth workers in order to ensure regular quality work with young people at the local levels. This is, I think, an action which has remained pretty much also like it was before. Essentially, we're talking about study visits, job shadowing, peer learning activities, networking and community building activities, training courses, seminars, workshops, these types of things that bring together youth workers from different countries, at least from 2 participating organizations from 2 different countries. Again, an activity can take place, in this case, from 2 to 60 days. So it can be very short, but it can also be quite extensive. Bringing together up to 50 participants in each activity. And of course, here is no age limit because professionals working with young people, yeah, can do that at any age in their lives. Also here, a preparatory visit is possible, bringing together some people from the project to prepare. And I think this is new. There are now also system development and outreach activities which can follow up from such a mobility of youth worker activity if the project specifically produces tools, for instance, or wants to add certain activities to ensure outreach into the community, or build the community further, and to organize activities in that sense. They cannot be massive, these outreach activities. I think they're rather small in terms of budget, but nevertheless, it's an additional possibility to follow up from a mobility project. Youth participation activities are to engage young people. Here, they follow up, I think, in essence, from originally what were in older programs called youth initiatives, but also a little bit from what we have as solidarity projects in the Solidarity Corps, as national activities. So the idea is originally that you would just have young group people, informal groups of young people that come together and they develop an initiative, engage in some kind of a project, and build something which hopefully has can remain after the support is finished, and that allows them to engage in some way actively in the community in which they live. So it's in essence a project that is built by young people, even more strongly than the other projects. It should originate ideally with the young people themselves coming together and wanting to do something. So provide young people with opportunities to engage and learn to participate in civic society, and to raise their awareness about European values and fundamental rights, their own fundamental rights. Of course, also to contribute to the European integration process then at the European level. It's also about digital competences, media literacy, resilience, to fake news and propaganda. And also about bringing together young people and decision makers. So to start political dialogue or engage in political dialogue. So here what is important is that young people play an active role in all stages of the project, even more strongly than in the other activities. As I said, there can be local activities, but this only in program countries. When it comes to involving partner countries, there must be at least 2 organizations from at least 2 countries involved. So there must be already a transnational dimension. The project can take up to 2 years. And here, what is different from the mobility of youth workers and youth exchanges is that the formats of these activities can be really flexible. And I think there we need to see what emerges, because nobody has experience with these youth participation activities. There is some experience from before with projects that encourage dialogue with policymakers under Key Action 3 and in the former program. But now there are a lot more possibilities, and we can see what will be handed in. So there are just some types of activities that are mentioned. So I will just say some of them. I mean, so there can be awareness raising campaigns, for instance, but also this kind of creating spaces for young people or access to spaces for young people where they can learn to participate in democratic life and processes, or some kind of consultation processes for young people. What is highlighted is that digital formats, so digital forms of participation, are highly encouraged. And that these activities may or may not include mobility activities. Otherwise, it's quite open. And so it's basically up to experimentation and to seeing with your partners what kinds of things would be interesting to do with the young people that you're working with. So this is Key Action 1. Now I have a few words about Key Action 2. Key Action 2 is only open to partner countries to a limited extent at the moment. This has come a bit as a surprise to me now when I read the program guide again, because there was a lot of talk of opening up Key Action 2 more to partner countries. For the moment, that's not the case, and therefore I will be rather brief when going through this. We're hoping, nevertheless, that this will change throughout the program. Some of you who have worked with the programs in the past might remember that under the last program, there was what was called a window for the Western Balkans. And this window was financed from different sources and then added to the Erasmus Plus program. And it allowed particularly organizations from partner countries in the Western Balkans to apply directly for projects. At the moment, this window is not there. At the moment, also other opportunities, similar opportunities that existed for other regions are not there. We are hoping, and from all we know, there are discussions, there are developments of these types of possibilities that they will come back. We cannot be sure about it, but we're hoping they will be back as of next year. But we do not know in which format also, if it will be the same as it was in the past, or if it might change, if it will be integrated into Erasmus Plus or come as a separate program next to it. We will be attentive to what is happening and will inform you as soon as there are developments. At the moment, it looks like this. We have partnerships for cooperation. In that framework of partnerships for cooperation, there are two types of partnerships that support cooperation among organizations, smaller types of projects and bigger types of projects. And the bigger types of projects can involve partner countries. It's not maybe so easy, but if you argue, well, why your organization takes part in such a project, it's fine. And it depends very much on the national agencies to what extent they will fund these projects or not. So it's worth really seeing. The policies of the national agencies will be very different on this level. Generally speaking, the action is about bringing innovation to youth work, and in particular youth work systems. It's about developing high quality projects and about contributing to achieving policy priorities. The projects are much larger and more complex than the projects under Key Action 1. And the same goes for capacity building projects in the field of youth, which are there to stimulate cooperation between program and partner countries in particular, but completely in a different perspective to foster capacity building and youth work development in partner countries. And I think the origin of this particular action is lying more in a development work type of approach. Yeah, so it's more in the sense of we are exporting the expertise existing in the European Union to the partner countries and develop the partner countries by bringing good practices and systems that have been developed in European Union countries to those partner countries. Yeah, so it's basically the opposite in a way perspective than we're having in the cooperation partnerships. I will not, as I said, I will not go through this in detail. We have specific priorities for these different actions, which nevertheless relate very much to the horizontal priorities of the program that should be addressed in these projects, namely inclusion, environment, digital transformation, civic engagement and participation. And as I said before, it's a lot about developing new approaches. It's also a lot about cross-sectorial cooperation. So here, what is very welcome is bringing together different sectors between practice, research, policy, potentially also the economic sector. And it's also about connecting youth work and the labor market in many ways. They're complex projects. As I said before, you have to involve several organizations from at least 3 different program countries in cooperation partnerships, plus other countries, potentially partner countries, if that's the case. So you have a larger group of partners working together. And here also the budgets work differently from what I have presented before, because the projects can take very different shapes and include different types of elements. Also the budget work is depending on what you're actually organizing. So you need to read your way through the program guide to see in detail what fits to my project, what would I like to do. Yeah. As you can see, the grants are much bigger, up to 400,000 euros for a cooperation partnership. However, this is depending also on the national agency. Smaller national agencies will have difficulties funding that large projects. In any case, that this is something which needs a lot of development together with your partners. Capacity building projects are very similar. I will not go through this. Are different in the sense, in particular, besides the focus that I have already mentioned, in that they are applied to the executive agency in Brussels. So here it's nothing, it's a very centralized approach. Once a year, also the application deadline was in July, once a year. Again, we're speaking large projects, and for these types of projects, you make a real budget, and then it's assessed by the executive agency, and up to 80% of the estimated cost of the project can be granted. Also here, you need at least 4 organizations from at least 3 different countries. Yeah. So this is all I'm saying. I will not go more into details. I think you will need to read anyway what you will need to find out. Just very briefly at the end, what I want to say is that investing in the partnership is essential. I mean, this is already very clear, especially if you are a partner country. The first step is to invest in the partnership. There are different tools that you can use, and I will say a few words about that maybe right at the end or in the following sessions of what tools and resources are available to find partners. It can also be expected that the process will take time until you're getting there. So it's also about being persistent. It's also about, you know, making sure you can take the time. It might not happen from today to tomorrow, but not to be discouraged immediately if you're encountering difficulties. Once you're in the process, it's worth it. And if you have questions coming up, please don't hesitate to ask. Ask the national agency which is financing the project, in particular through your project partner that is submitting the project. But also don't hesitate to be in touch with either us or our contact points to find out more or to ask any questions that you have. In particular also to how things are implemented in practice. What does that mean? What do I actually need to do? And so on. This is it. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonja.
I know this was very long and I apologize, but it's a lot of information. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot of information, and I guess that also people will need a bit of time to digest, but there are few questions also popping up in the Padlet, and few of them are a bit more overall towards the program and towards the participation of the Western Balkans countries in the program, which I would leave maybe for a bit later, but there are a few also which are quite specific to the Erasmus Plus program that maybe I can quickly raise now with you, and then we can move on forward to the Solidarity Corps and Andre. So there is a question about what is considered the green travel exactly, except of trains, are buses and ferries sustainable?
Yes. Yes. It can be used very flexibly in a way. There's no description of what is green travel. We know it's trains, but it can also be other forms of transport. So if you argue that taking a bus, you know, is green as compared to taking everybody their own car, for instance, it's green travel. No, and it depends on the national agency how they actually understand that.
Yeah. Good, thank you. So it also depends from the context, which region it is and how connected it is with rail and so on. There is a question about eligibility. Are we eligible as Western Balkans to apply in both key actions? Is it enough to get key action 1 accreditation? How it works? I think that this was, it's quite a broad question and it was partially explained, but maybe just as eligibility for Western Balkans in both key actions, as we said, as partners in the project that are applied by program countries, yes. And about the key action accreditation, how it works, Are the Western Balkans countries or organizations eligible for Key Action 1 accreditation?
Only organizations that apply for projects can or might want to even get accreditation or can apply for accreditation. If you're a partner, you do not need to worry about this at all. No. And organizations in partner countries at the moment cannot apply for a project.
Exactly. And there is one question about the youth participation activities. So which is the minimum number of partners for a local activity? Should they be from the same country? Is it allowed to be from the same city? Is it quite localized, or it's focused also to, it's more value to have different parts of a country? So maybe about deconstructing the participation activity. I guess we will discuss about this also when we talk about in the fifth workshop, when we talk about participation in democratic life, and we will also focus on the participation activities. But briefly, Sonja.
In a program country, you can do a local activity which involves just one organization. Yeah, it's a very localized project. It can be a very localized project. But in a if you're involving partner countries in your project, so for those of you coming from a partner country, the perspective is that national activities, or in that sense also local activities, cannot happen there. You always need a partner in a program country. This means that you have to have at least 2 groups of young people from 2 countries in a project. So, yeah. So it can still be very localized, but you need 2 groups of young people, one of them being based in a program country and one of them can be in a partner country.
Great, thank you. So for the quick answers,